Here at Visit with Spirit, we are not out to prove or disprove anything. We are not asking anyone to believe or not believe. We are asking that you, the listener, are compassionate to what our guests have experienced, whether or not you believe. That you respect their journey as we help them on their path of healing.
Welcome to Visit with Spirit, and we're here to listen to stories from those who have had a paranormal experience, as well as to help them process, understand, and feel good about it.
Welcome, souls and spirits. This is your host, J.D.
And I'm your host, Lisa.
Today we're going to be hearing from our friend Laura, who is going to share some of her experiences with a haunted house.
I read about Laura's story, so I know you know more about it. Personally, I had read through it as a summary, and I noticed that there were a lot of similarities that coincided with the birth of her daughter and the increase of activity in the house. And it related a little bit back to my story, where I feel like there was a lot of energy attached to the house that I grew up in, because even though people didn't experience a lot of what I experienced, there was no doubt that there was always a family in the home that had domestic abuse and or substance abuse. There was just a lot of chaos. And I think that having a child while living in an environment like that can absolutely kick up that energy. So we're going to hear from Laura and her experience about the Manville house. So Laura, if you could please share your story with us, we would love to hear it.
Okay, well, my daughter's father and I, we had decided to move in together, or I thought it was a good idea at the time, to move into a place in Manville, New Jersey. It was being rented out by a friend of his. This lady was renting out the house, and I didn't know a lot about Manville. You know, the house looked kind of nice. It was like surrounded, I would say, on 3/4 of the house by grass.
Oh, nice.
So we're like in the middle of this big grassy kind of patch, and then surrounded by tons of old houses. And it was a kind of a rectangular house in a sense. Like when you're driving down the street, you saw the side of the house. It was almost like a light salmony color, pinkish color. And the front, what you would have thought was our front door, was like on the street, but that actually led, one, to the person who lived upstairs, second, to a door that we had that was off the bedroom, but like it was blocked. It was like never really used, or it didn't work or something of such. So thank God there were no emergencies or fires. So we used to go like across the grass and then like around to what I always thought is the back of the house. And there was like maybe 1 or 2 steps that you would step up. And then on the left, there was like a space. If you looked in, you could see stairs going down into the basement. And then if you went straight, you went up like maybe 5 more steps. And there was like a little cabinet. It was, I've never seen this before, but like a square door that you could open up, and you could actually store stuff in there. Oh. It wasn't cold, but like you could put, I guess, extra things in there.
Almost like a root cellar.
Yeah, and I never really stored anything in there simply because I always imagined it being, 1, hot, and 2, because the outside door was just like a screen door, so I don't ever remember it being locked in that sense. So that was kind of like I didn't put anything in there. And then you had like the big wooden door that was old, that like when you open it, you were like right into the kitchen. And as you stepped into the kitchen, like kind of behind you was the bathroom, and then everything just went straight back. Mm-hmm. It was like you were facing like the stove, but between the stove and the sink, there was like an entryway, and there was like a long kind of rectangular room that was like our television room, as I would call it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then as soon as you walked through that, there was a door, and then there was the bedroom. And that was like the size of the whole place, but it went straight back. So I don't remember if when I first moved in or not, you know, and I was still expecting my daughter. I hadn't given birth to her yet. If there was really any, you know, activity at the time going on. In the beginning, it was a little bit chaotic. I know that the day that I was giving birth to my daughter, I was going to dinner with my parents, and her father was supposed to come. And at the last minute, he never came home. He didn't show up. I don't know whether he was at work or his brothers or something, but so I went to my parents' house without him. And they had asked, and I, of course, had a standard list of excuses, and things to say. And they're like, oh, okay, Not that they believed me, but they were like, okay. And we kind of had dinner together. My stepmom was a nurse. In the middle, or towards the end of dinner, I kind of felt like, wow, like this might be the time. My stepmom could see I was panicked. She did a little check and said, yeah, you might be ready. My stepmom was taking me home, and she said, if it's the thing that you're going to give birth, because I didn't have a car at the time, she said, call an ambulance. They will take you right down there if we can't get here fast enough. And they were in Hillsborough. It took them maybe 12 minutes, 15 minutes maximum to get to me. But by the time we got home, as it turned out, my stepmom was like, you know what, you still really don't look good. She's like, I'm just going to take you to the hospital. I think it's safer. And it was just by the grace of God that he came flying in the door thinking he was off the hook and that nobody was there. And there was my stepmom, Oh, we missed you for dinner. I was just relieved he was sober.
Oh.
So we raced to the hospital, and she just threw stuff at him and said, here, take these. And off we went. And then less than 24 hours later, I gave birth to my daughter. And then we came back to the house. In the beginning, I didn't really, like I said, when she was very young, like just the first couple months, I didn't notice anything. But I noticed that when she got to a point of where, like, she was able to kind of sit up on her own, we would sometimes sit her on the floor. And there was an old chair. It was kind of a high back chair. If I'm correct, it had like these big like screws almost that were round, and they were like very antique looking, that kind of upholstered into the chair to hold the fabric on. And then it had like
a
little bit of a wooden like handle at the end of the arms. It just came with the house. I never got rid of it. I was like, well, we didn't have a lot of furniture.
Bonus.
Anything free, I'm like, okay, it didn't smell, wasn't stained, we were good. So I kept the chair there. But like my daughter would sometimes be sitting on the floor, and she'd be in that corner, and she'd kind of always look up at the ceiling, and she just kind of smile and start waving at the ceiling and, babbling kind of like in her own way. And her dad is very superstitious, and he does not like many things on the superstitious realm. They make him very uncomfortable. Anything he can't control makes him angry or uneasy. And so he'd always say, why is she doing that? Why is she waving at the ceiling? What is she doing? I'm like, oh, it's probably my mom. My mom and my grandmother had passed away, many years before then. So I was like, it's probably my mom or my grandmother, and they're just watching. So you got to watch out because they're watching you. So he didn't like that. That used to make him like so nervous. Like, tell her to stop doing that. I don't. But she always did it. And it was like, that was the corner for her. I like put a swing there. You sit her in the swing, turn on the swing. She'd fall asleep. She'd, kind of stare at the ceiling. She'd talk, whatever. And that was like, at first, that was like the extent of it. Then it got to a point where sometimes I'd be in the kitchen, and I'd be like on the right side of the kitchen. I'd be washing dishes or doing something, and you'd hear like a little like, and like when wood rubs against wood. And so like I knew like, okay, the kitchen door is opening, and it was a pretty heavy door because it was older. And so a couple of times, like I was a little nervous because I was like, all right, I would turn around, there'd be no one there. A couple of times I didn't even bother turning around. I'm just like, all right, the door opened again. And I would just continue to wash dishes. And after a while, it was kind of like, I don't know why I get nervous about this. It happens all the time. And I would just like kind of in my head, or sometimes I'd say, okay, who's ever there? Come on in. All I'm doing is washing dishes. Nothing exciting, but come in.
Oh, I love it.
And it was just like kind of my way of saying, all right, this is my house. So I got to get over this like fear that, yeah, the door bumped and it's open a little bit. It wasn't anybody physically. Nothing's going to happen, but I didn't feel like anything at first. Then after a while, sometimes we get to the point of I'd be in the kitchen either washing dishes or I'd be like at the stove cooking, and I knew someone was standing behind me. And it'd be just like that feeling of, someone is like right behind me. And I never turned around because I thought, well, if I turn around, I'm liable to see something. So it's probably safer not to turn around.
Yep.
I can understand that.
So I would just continue cooking dinner or doing whatever. And eventually the sensation of someone standing there would go away. At one point in time, my daughter was in the bedroom. She was sleeping, and we were sitting on this lovely pink velour fringed couch that someone had given us.
Wow.
Yeah, sometimes you got to say no to gifts.
Yeah.
We were sitting on this couch, and I noticed that, like, even though the bedroom door, it wasn't a heavy door, it was closed, that it was just wiggling back and forth and jiggling a little bit and moving slightly. So, of course, her dad now is watching the television, and he's getting out and he's going, you see the door? And I'm like, yeah, okay. And so he got mad and he had on like these like work boots, like these brown, whatever, Timberlands or whatever. And he threw it at the door. And he said, maybe that'll make it stop. And I was like, well, I don't want you to do that because she's sleeping. We have 5 minutes of quiet. And she wasn't a crybaby. Like she doesn't scream. She didn't howl all that often. You know, she was really a good baby. Thank God through everything that happened. You know, she was a good baby, but it was like, I didn't want her to wake her up. Like that wasn't the solution, to throw a shoe at the door and think they'd go away quietly or nicely. But, you know, that was his solution. Tell them to shut up or whatever. And he threw a shoe at the door. But I believe it continued to wiggle a little bit back and forth. And the thing was, all the windows were closed. Actually, another time I came home from work. It was kind of late in the evening. And when we had set up our apartment, we had like pictures up on the walls. And I'm very short, so he helped me hang pictures. And I had a charcoal drawing of me that he thought was a great idea to put in the bathroom over the toilet, like way up on the wall. I'm like, well, that's great. A 5-year-old charcoal drawing of me over the toilet. But and we had 1 clock radio that my parents gave me as like a graduation gift from private school. And so like you could put cassettes in it and it told the time and it had a radio. And it was the only clock we had. And he decided to put it on top of the refrigerator, which for me was kind of a problem because I could never change the time or do anything unless I stood on a chair. And even then I was like stretching to reach this clock that was the only spot he could find in the house. But you know what? It was some kind of help. So I was, okay, thanks. And I came in from work and it was probably like maybe 9 o'clock at night. And the radio was going beep, beep, and it was just going off. And it was also not on a station. So you could hear the static because it was between the stations.
Oh.
And so I finally like walk into the next room. And I mean, even though it's a rectangular house, it's not huge. And I'm like, do you not hear that? And he's like, what? And I said, oh my gosh. I'm like, you don't hear the noise coming from the kitchen? He's like, oh yeah, something's going off. And so like I stood on the chair and had to physically like turn off the alarm and turn off the radio. I'm like, well, did you turn it on? He's like, no. But the thing was like so loud, and God knows how long it's been going on. And it might have just happened when I came in, I don't know, but it was like making so much noise. So I turned everything off and I was like, all right, that was kind of strange. I think the main thing that happened, like there was a lot of little things like that, you know, and always knowing that someone was ever never seen.
Yeah.
There was a time where Monica was asleep in the bedroom. I was in the bedroom. I was folding laundry or something. And again, like on the right side of the house, there was like windows. So there was like, because it was a long house, there were like maybe like one window in the bedroom. And then there was one window in the television room. And then there was like a window in the kitchen. So they all kind of went along the side of the house. I was folding the laundry, doing something, and I happened to look up and for whatever reason, look out the window. And I saw this kind of shortish person with dark hair walking along the side of the house. And, you know, for me, in a second, I thought, oh my God, Monica's dad's home early from work, you know, and I thought this is kind of a strange time for him to come home. But there were days he went to work, days he didn't, you know, I didn't know. He switched his schedule all the time and anything was possible. And I just thought, oh God, he's coming home. And if he's coming home early, you know, to me, that was like a bad sign. I'm running into the kitchen. I'm like, oh, I got to start making him some kind of dinner, you know, because he'll be hungry and he'll be mad, you know, and yelling because there's nothing made. And so I like start cooking something on the stove and I'm washing some dishes and I'm like trying to get things set. And it was probably a good maybe 5-10 minutes in when I realized like, my God, he hasn't even come in the house yet. And here I am like hurrying to do all these things. And I didn't see him. I didn't hear him. So I looked out the kitchen window and I could kind of see most of the grassy area. And I'm like, I don't see him. And there was like nobody out there and there was nobody in the streets. And it was probably during the week and it was like an early, like maybe like 11 in the morning or something. So like a lot of people were at work, but there was like nobody out there. So I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. And then I turned around to look at the kitchen door to see if maybe he was coming up the stairs or coming in. And all I saw was like just the upper body of like a head and the shoulders of whatever this person was just disappear like into that little opening. And, you know, there are the stairs that go into the basement, but it looked like the head and the shoulders part I could see. There wasn't much else that I could see, but it was just enough that you could see they didn't need to duck, but they just went right into like that little opening and disappeared. That for me was like really scary because in a sense that I could only see part of them and the fact that they were going into the basement and I didn't hear the screen door opening. You know, there was no reaction from the kitchen door, whatever. So eventually I made dinner, you know, which would have been dinner for him, I think, because he was working nights then. But and I kind of packed everything up and just saved it. But I didn't go down to the basement again, and he didn't come home until like maybe 6 or 7 hours later. So I didn't say anything to him, but I was like, okay, obviously something here, and they've gone into the basement. I'm not going into the basement. And then it was maybe, I don't know whether it was a couple days later or how much later, that he was telling me the story. He said, I had a thing happen today. He said, I was sleeping on the bed, with Monica. And he said, and I felt someone pulling at my feet. And he said, so I sat up in bed, and here was this boy with dark hair standing in front of me.
Oh, wow.
And he said, who's breaking into our house? And, oh, they're going to take my stuff. I mean, he had a pair of boots. That's really all he owned. So why he was worried. But, he was like scared. Like, they're going to take some. They're going to rob us. They're stealing us. And he looked over on the bed. He didn't see Monica on the bed. So, of course, he panics. And he says, and I run out of the bedroom, and I run through the whole entire house and like got into the kitchen. And it takes, 3 seconds to get from one end to the other. And he's like, and the kitchen door was closed. He's like, but I opened the kitchen door. He said, I went out. I looked all around the house and the yard. He said, there was no one there. He said, then I ran back in the house because I had to find out, where Monica was. And it turned out she had rolled over and fallen, thank God, on a pile of laundry.
Oh, thank God.
Wow.
And he was like, well, at least she was there. He said, but I wanted to know who was in my house, And the description he gave of the person was the exact same person I had seen going down into the basement.
Wow.
So I kind of knew that, okay, this is the person that is in the house. So I had a friend who's pretty intuitive with connecting to other people. And I said, this is what happened. And I said, I want you to come to the house and see if you get a sense of who it is, or if it's somebody, or, if there's somebody here, or if it's just me. So he came into the house and he sat for a little bit. And he said, yes, that there was a boy in the house. He said the boy's name was John, which that name has been following me around for a long time. I see the name everywhere. So he said, yeah, it was a boy and his name was John. He gave a little description of him, and it matched the description of the person that I had seen and that her father had seen. So I was kind of like, okay, now I kind of had a name and a face to put to it. And then I don't remember how much longer later it was, because we were only there for maybe a year and a half, but it was in October and Hurricane Floyd was coming.
Oh, yes.
And there was like a big storm, and that was getting ready to come. And it was like maybe on a Sunday or Monday, Monica's dad actually left to go to work, and he didn't come home. And it had been about 2 days, he hadn't come home. So I was kind of like not sleeping. And I was like, God, when he comes home, I can just imagine what he's going to be like. So I was tense, and maybe some of that had transferred, into the house onto my daughter. But he finally did come home like on a Wednesday, and he had stitches in his face, and he was a little black and blue, and he had a cast on.
Oh my gosh.
Long story short, he was riding his bike when he shouldn't have been riding his bike, and he hit a car.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Probably, 15 or 20 people in the area that saw it happen. And when the police came, they said, oh, we didn't see anything. We don't know. And so he was taken to the hospital. It took them about 3 hours to subdue him before they could examine him and get him to calm down. And he was just very inebriated. And so he came back to the house with like 50 pages of instructions of things that he was supposed to follow up and do afterwards that were all in Spanish, none of which I understood. And I was like, God, I can't help you with this. But we were like, okay, now we have an issue because now we can't work. And then the next day, it was like Hurricane Floyd hit. And it totally destroyed the house, everything. The watermark outside was at least, I would say, a good, I'm 5'1", so it's probably a good 4 feet over my head or more.
Whoa.
Feet of water in our kitchen, which meant the basement was underwater and everything else. The water was enough and forceful enough, like the stove was like almost sideways,
God.
And it was like everything was moved in the house. And from the mud, and you flush the toilet and all the mud would come up into the bathtub. And it was like a hot mess. We had to move out of the house and we had to move everything out, which, one of my brothers was very, very extremely helpful in that sense of moving me out, because her dad couldn't really do anything. He had the boot on, and then, it got wet from the flood. So then he didn't want to wear it. And basically there were bones that were broken in his ankle and he needed pins and screws.
Oh God.
So he was kind of limping around, and we were, my brother was kind of angry that he wasn't helpful, and was kind of, I think my brother was now seeing the whole picture of how everything really was compared to what I was saying. And so he was just really mad. And as we were like moving stuff out of the house, like I went inside, I remember just feeling like all of a sudden I was like feeling so guilty. Like the house is a mess and this is how we're leaving it. With all the anger inside, all the problems we had unresolved. Now everything's being taken out and put on the curb to be taken away. There's nothing left. And it was kind of like, I felt like I had left the house in a disarray, you know, and it was like at one point in time, there was like one piece of furniture that we used to just shove all our photos and things in. And as I was opening up the drawer and seeing if there were any salvageable photos, there was an envelope that was kind of purple. And normally it said photos on it, and it was in Monica's dad's handwriting. And it was of me and a friend of mine who I used to live with that is intuitive in her own sense. And she takes care of all these animals. And she's like a good friend of mine. And she had taken him and Monica and me to see this horse. She was this deer actually that she had found and had rescued. That was in the road and it was on a horse farm, and to see her horse and a bunch of things. And Monica was very young, and it was all pictures of that inside. And for some reason, as soon as I opened the drawer and I looked at the cover, even though I know it always said photos, for some reason it said John right on the cover.
Oh, whoa.
Wow.
And so that to me was, I'm sorry I didn't write that in my story. I was just thinking about it, but I was like, why would it say John? Then going through the pictures, I'm like, yeah, but it's me and my friend Joan, and it's like Monica's dad, and Monica when she was like 5 months, you know, petting the deer and petting the horse and whatnot. So I'm not really sure what his message was for leaving that there, but I was able to, thank goodness, at least save all the pictures that were in the drawer.
That's great.
And then moved out. And I just always remember feeling guilty and saying, you know, I'm so sorry that we're leaving the house this way, you know, we're leaving. And in my own non-thinking, I was like, you know, we're moving, we're leaving, you know, wherever you go, if you want to come with us. I said, you're more than welcome to come. I said, because I'm so sorry that we're leaving the house, you know, the way that we did.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I just felt better. Here we're able to move out and move on kind of in our, you know, our twisted lives. And here he was probably still stuck in this house that maybe he still saw it as it was when he was a child.
Maybe.
And he still thought the house looked new.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe he saw it like we did, where it was covered in mud and it was moldy and everything was damaged. I didn't know, but.
Oftentimes when spirits do attach to us, they do feel a familiarity or a safety. Possibly he saw you as a mother figure, or he possibly, you know, as you're sharing this story, I just kept thinking the word protective, that he was feeling protective of you and Monica.
Yeah.
Were there any incidences before you moved into this house, like whether you were younger or just in a different house? Had you had other metaphysical experiences?
I had, in all honesty, several. My friend who I mentioned, Joan, when I lived with her, we lived in White House Station in a very old house. It was probably 100 and something years old. And
oh, yeah.
A couple of times, like in the house, when I was there, I like heard someone calling my name, like very clearly, heard someone saying the name Laura. I'd be like, hello, you know, but like no one would answer. On several occasions, the room that I slept in, like I'd sleep and I would hear someone knock on the door in the middle of the night. And at the time, I was dating my daughter's father. So him being in the house and knocking on the door was not unheard of because he knew how to get in without being invited in, which was like a really not a good thing, but I'd like wake up in the middle of the night and I'd hear like this knock on the door. And for a second I would panic, like, oh God, you know, he's in the house and he wants to stay. I would go to the door and I would open it and there'd be no one there. Like one time I actually opened it and no one was there. Another time I was like really tired and I was just like, come in. And like the door never opened, nobody answered. And then like,
well, that could be a blessing right there.
Because, thank God, like nothing walked in. It happened at least 3 or 4 times, but like the last time when I heard that knock on the door was when I got up and I was like, okay, and I opened the door. And it wasn't all within a month. It happened over maybe a couple of months. Like, but I just remember it vividly, like, the loud knock, waking me up out of my sleep when I opened the door, like there was nobody out there. And the terrible thing is when I told my stepmom about it, she's like, well, you know, we have this saying in Ireland that, you know, when you hear 3 knocks on the door, it usually means someone close to you has passed away. And I'm like, well, thank you, but I don't want to know that. my roommate, as metaphysical in a sense and as attuned as she was to all that, she's like, you sure? Because the house is old. It wasn't like one of the shutters on the side of the house that was just banging in the wind or something that was loose. And I was like, no, but it was clear like someone knocking on the door and like someone calling my name at times. So there were little things like that, that you would just hear.
An interesting observation that I made through your story was, I think as Reiki practitioners, we tend to analyze energy.
Yes.
And no pun intended in regards to the hurricane, but you kind of had like the perfect storm of energy moving in. You had old furniture, you had a new baby. There's you who is very open to these things.
Yes.
And clearly your daughter's father is open to these things, whether he likes it or not, because there is that. Not only was there a controlling personality, but it was fear-based control.
Yes.
So you have a lot of fear, but you have openness. So you have these two dynamics energetically in the same place, along with, again, old furniture, new baby. So there's like a huge pendulum of energy just flowing through this house. So I just thought that was a cool thing to hear and to start to put together in my head to get a better picture energetically of where you were living.
That is such a great observation. And I was thinking the same thing. I didn't put it together with the hurricane, but certainly with the new baby, the new, moving into a new place. It's the same thing. And when you move into a new place, especially if it's older, you can stir up old energies as you're rearranging things. For anybody listening, if you do construction on a house that had previous owners, that is another time when it can kind of awaken, maybe for lack of a better term, sleeping spirits.
So Laura, have you heard from John since you've moved?
Since I moved, like physically, in a sense, no, but it was kind of like, I don't know if it happened before I went into the house or if after we moved out, but it just seemed like I'd be talking to people and they'd be like, well, my brother, John. I'm like, oh, John. And for a while there, I was just like, oh, wow, there's that name again. Or my friend's husband named John, or my cousin named John, or my father named John. And there was actually a John on my side of the family. So the name just was always popping up, or I'd be driving somewhere. I'd be like, oh, look, we would be doing gallery and we'd be driving to J.D. Circle. There was the street on the way there, John Street. And like the name always came up everywhere I went. I would see the word John, or if I, was at the bank, until his name was John or something. It just always kind of really stuck out. I was like, wow, I see this at least 4 or 5 times a week, like in odd spots. It's always there. There was one time where Monica and I were in Hightstown, and we were going to a restaurant. We sat down, and at these tables, it was like a fast food Mexican type place. They had little plants on the windowsills, and I just randomly picked a spot and sat down, and I turned around and looked, and it was a cactus plant, and literally written on the cactus plant, it said, hi, my name is John.
Wow.
Whoa.
I was like, oh, look, Monica, there's John again. So I'm sure she's tired of hearing me say that, but I point it out all the time. Oh, there's another John, there's a John Street, there's a whatever.
So I have a question. When we get to the healing portion today, if we come across John's energy, is that something that you're ready to help cross over?
Yes.
So in regards to the house, Laura, this is exactly what Jay and I are trying to help people with, because again, as someone who grew up in a house with paranormal experiences, if anyone's had a paranormal experience, those places and those events really do stay with you. What feelings, what emotions still keep you tied to that event and that location that you want us to help you heal today?
I guess part of it is just, again, like I said, the way I left the house, because, we really did kind of leave it on a bad note. And in the end, my daughter's father had a severe control issue, but he wanted to kind of not ask for help from anybody and kind of do it his way. And in the end, when the house was destroyed and we had to get rid of everything, it was like suddenly, yeah, we had to ask for help. My brother had to come and help, which that was like a big sin on my part, I guess, having him come to the house and help, because he didn't like that at all. And it was like, all the different things that had to come in, people that had to come in and help us financially and assistance and check out the apartment and make sure we qualify with FEMA and the Red Cross and all those things. It was like suddenly, he had control over nothing. And they all spoke English and he spoke mostly Spanish. So that really kind of came to a head in the end. And, it's like every now and then I just, I drive by the house and I wonder, like, what is it like for the new people? And I'd always love to like park near the grass and like take a picture of the house at night to see if there's any orbs or anything on it. But at the same time, I don't want to be creepy.
Yes. I was just going to ask if the house was still standing and if there were people living in it, because I do the same thing. I've just finally started working with Jay to release some of those cords and some of those karmic ties to that house. But yeah, absolutely. There's times where you really do want to drive up and just knock on the door and be like, can I just come in one more time? There's unfinished business.
Yeah.
On the spirit side, but also on the human side, because you never were able to kind of reconcile in your mind what really happened and never really found closure to those events. So again, if anyone listening has been through that, this is what I want people to feel, is that there is a commonality here of these experiences and how you feel after.
Yes.
And how to process these things after they occur. But yeah, like I said, I totally get the driving by and checking on it to make sure it's okay. Like, is the house okay? Because houses really do have personalities. When you go into a home,
Yes.
if it feels warm and friendly, or is it cold and uninviting? And it's not just energy. It really is. Homes can sometimes really be, feeling like living beings. So I totally get that part of driving by and looking at it and like I said, checking in and make sure everybody and everything's okay inside.
With like Hurricane Ida, I know the house had another devastating blow. However many people moved in to that house since I left, like, was the house even more like upside down and the activity so bad that they had to move out? Or I always wonder, like, did we leave it in such a state like that now it doesn't matter how they fixed it up or got rid of the mold or whatever and had new people move in, put a little stucco on there and said, it's new, come in, if people had any experience like I did, and if it was worse than what I did now because of how we left it.
Yeah, I always wonder that too, because we were in our house for almost 20 years, the place I grew up in, and I'm always like, what energetic imprint did we leave on top of what was already there? And what do the people there experience now? If they're experiencing anything, what did we contribute, fortunately or unfortunately, as the case may be, to the energy that was already there? So you talk about energy and spirits, and you think things that have passed or, not of this world, but you never consider people who are still alive who left an imprint someplace, somehow.
Well, I think it's interesting how you're talking about the personality of a house, because I remember when I was shopping for homes and I was looking around, I was between two places. The one I'm in now, which I lost the first time around because I bought this at the height of the real estate bubble, many years back. And another home, which I feel like it almost had twice the square footage, and it was closer to Trenton, and it had a backyard. It really was kind of everything I was looking for. It even had the same vase that I had, which I thought was like, whoa, because it was an unusual vase. It was not like, something you get from like the florist. I was like, ooh, this is a sign. But as soon as I walked in and I was walking around, it looked beautiful, loved it. And it was a kind of a cool old one of those row homes, but I felt so lonely. Like, that was the word that just kept sweeping over me, was I felt isolated and lonely. And it was a row home, so I wouldn't have been lonely. There would have been neighbors on either side of me. And I ended up in a situation where there are still neighbors on either side of me. But when I walked into the house that I'm in now, it was open and expansive, and it felt like welcoming, where the other one, I felt like I would have been just cut off from the world. And as you're talking, it brought me back to that moment of how that, it never dawned on me then that it was an energetic imprint, or that I was picking up on something. So I think it's interesting, never thought to look into that, whether it was somebody who had lived there prior and they were still alive, but that was their imprint, or somebody who had passed and left that imprint. But I just remember feeling so overwhelmed that it wasn't even a question anymore. It was a better deal. I would have had more space. I would have had my own backyard. And it was just like, no. And I, at first I thought, well, it's because I feel isolated from my friends because they were more up north, but it was only like 3 or 4 miles difference. It was not a big difference travel wise. So that part wasn't even logical. So I think it's interesting you talk about the personality and the imprints that we leave both as living people and as people who've passed. I think it is a good moment to shift into the healing session of this podcast. For those who are tuning in for the first time, when we have guests on, we shift into the healing part where Lisa and I help our guests to release, to forgive, to let go of any energy that still lingers with them. So Lisa, would you like to start that off?
Absolutely. Laura, do we have your permission to tune in to the energy that may be surrounding you?
Yes.
I would like to actually start with that house and send some healing energy directly to that house and that space. And Laura, if we see any cords between you and that home, do we have your permission to release those cords?
Yes.
Oh, I only see one. I don't know about you, Lisa, but I am seeing one cord. And when we release cords, friends, for any of our fellow Reiki practitioners out there, you do want to release. You don't want to cut. When you cut a cord, it can reattach. You want to release it right from the root. It's a thin cord, but it seems fairly strong. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to help release from both sides. As I'm releasing, in your mind, Laura, I want you to say, I forgive and release in love and light, as many times as you need to in your mind until you feel that tension release. And I'm feeling like it's going to your abdomen.
Yeah, that's absolutely where I'm feeling it too.
Okay. I'm glad we're on the same page with that. So you just close your eyes and in your mind, I forgive and release with love and light. You could even say, I release all cords to this space. I release with gratitude for the lessons I've learned, but I no longer need those lessons in my life, however you want to word it. But whenever we release, friends, it's always with love, with gratitude, with light. Oh, it's a deep-rooted cord. It's like going through your abdomen and like down into your foot.
I see it almost like a cable that's made up of multiple smaller cords. Yep. So that's how I'm picking up on it. It's one cord, but made of many smaller connections.
I've seen that before with other people, so it's not surprising. I didn't get a close-up look. I'm just seeing it like going through the abdomen, down through the foot. And it's weird because I'm almost seeing it like bolted into your foot, like a nut and bolt. So like a wing nut, actually, to be specific. Which, I know this sounds strange to friends who are not in the Reiki world, or even if you are in the Reiki world, if you are not visual, you may not always see what you're helping to release. But I'm actually undoing this little wing nut here.
It's interesting that you say it's a rooted cord, because I saw it as the color red, which is the root chakra color.
Oh, interesting.
It's starting to turn blue, which I find interesting, and that's associated with the throat, and we're talking about this story today. So even sharing stories can help to release a lot of that energy.
Yes. And just to let you guys into my process, and Lisa, definitely share your process too. What I'm seeing is I undid that little kind of wing nut, spiritual wing nut, at the bottom of the foot, and I just kind of pushed the cable up and out through the abdomen. And then I also released it from the house as well. And I bring up what I call the celestial fire. And whenever I remove an object like a cord or a veil or a block, I see it going into the celestial fire to just burn it up and to heal it. And then I take some of that fire and I just infuse both with that fire.
So for me, when it comes to cords and attachments, because energy goes both ways, I almost see it as a handshake in the middle.
Oh, interesting. I like that.
And there's almost an agreement to send the energy back to where it belongs on both sides, but also with healing and understanding so that the energy that is yours comes back to you with healing. The energy that belongs to the other person or location goes back to them with energy and healing. And the handshake indicates the gratitude for the experience and for the energy and for the learning. And, but the contract is almost, almost as if the contract is complete and the handshake agreement lets go.
I love that analogy. And I love that we have both similarities in how we're picking up on the energy, but that we have different procedures, because it goes to show other practitioners out there that it doesn't matter how you visually get it. It's the intention and it is the purpose that you go in to the healing with. But the end result is the same. It's that both sides are healed, and you always do a release with the intention of the highest good for all involved. So I just love that. I love that we have different procedures, but again, same result. Okay, I'm now shifting into looking around Laura to see if there's any. Oh, okay, yep. I am seeing, I don't know if this is John yet, but I'm definitely seeing a male energy. Laura, when you saw him, did he appear a little bit shorter than you?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, there's a very kind energy with this. It's kind.
I'm getting like a male with dark hair. I see like a leather jacket. Almost very kind, relatable, almost a bit isolated to like had been through some stuff and he relates. There's a relating, the emotions are relatable. So I think that's why he attached. And I found interesting that I just said attached. So that word kind of came out of nowhere. But, I almost see like the hands in the pockets, the head down, like a really good person, a really sensitive person who just saw some stuff that just was not good for anybody. And it hurt them so hard that they almost feel like you said earlier, that protective energy.
Yes.
They can relate. And so they're there to kind of be protective because they've seen it. They've been through it.
And I feel like he is more protective of Monica. And I think because she was so young at the beginning of this, where you guys enter his story, so to speak. And I'm just asking him if he's ready to move on. And he actually is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not hearing him too well, but I'm almost feeling like he's kind of waited for this moment.
I feel like even though he showed up at the other house, he was never attached to it. I heard the word wandering.
Oh.
So I don't think it was the house. So I don't think you have to worry about him being stuck there, because I don't think he was ever attached to the location.
Yeah. Yeah, because if he was, he wouldn't have come with you.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like he might have lived in the area, though.
Yes.
Those kids like who just kind of can't go home,
mm-hmm.
like because it's just too toxic, and so like they're always at their friends' houses. They're they're kind of hanging around the neighborhood.
Yep, just walking everywhere.
Yeah, just doing everything they can to avoid going home. That's the feeling I get. And when you guys moved in, you felt safe. He did not like your ex, though.
Mm-mm.
Oh my gosh, he's funny. He's showing me him behind the door when the boot hit, and he's just laughing. Oh, you know what? I think he took great pleasure
in tormenting him.
Yes. And he's making me feel like that's all he's going to say on it. And it's a mischievous pleasure. It's not like malicious. It's mischievous, like kind of putting him in his place in a way that he's saying he wasn't able to do that to his own father.
Yep.
And it was kind of his way of getting back. Oh, so interesting. Okay. I am calling the angels and the loved ones who know John to help him go to the other side peacefully with ease and grace and with love, to be embraced and healed. Oh, and he's whistling something. Oh gosh, I wish I could hear which song it is. It almost sounds like the Andy Griffith song, like the whistling in the beginning. Yes, yep, that one. But he's whistling it kind of as he's going. He's not leaving with sadness, because I think he knows that you two are safe now. I think he's crossed already. That was really fast.
Yeah, he was ready. He was so ready.
Oh, I almost feel tears of release or tears of relief.
I just keep hearing thank you.
How are you feeling, Laura?
I'm feeling very good in a sense. I was a little sad at first, but I'm glad that, he was ready to go, and he was probably, in a little way, I feel bad that he was probably waiting for so long. Like, come on, just let me go. And when I saw on the envelope and when he was attached to the house, but I do like at first, when you said he was kind of wandering around, in my head, I kept hearing that song, The Wanderer.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So I kept hearing that, and I was like, huh. And so I kind of started laughing to myself. And then, like, when you said he was ready to go in the end, I was hearing that Supertramp song, Goodbye, Stranger. It's been nice. Hope you find your paradise. Glad to see your point. You hope your dreams are true.
And we've said this before in other podcasts, but they can come back once they cross over, and they can reconnect with you then, but it'll be from a place of peace and of healing and of love. Don't be surprised if he does come back around every once in a while to say hello. And especially where you are so sensitive, you'll know. And now you have 2 songs or 3 songs that you can connect to him, so that when you hear, for those who don't know, Laura is very gifted, both as a Reiki healer, but also as a medium. And she gets a lot of messages through music. And I hope you don't mind me saying that, but you are quite gifted.
And we're all clearly on the same wavelength, because I'm actually, in regards to him coming back, I was actually seeing the envelope with the name John on it and a white feather next to it. So you will know the signs when he comes back.
And I do collect feathers when I find them. I have a jar that I save them in.
Oh, neat.
Oh.
That is lovely. I'm just going to surround you with some extra light and protection. Take a nice deep breath. And as you breathe out, just release anything residual. See yourself surrounded by beautiful white light. And anything that passes through this light will be transmuted into positive energy, going in either direction. And this light will stay with you for about the next week or so, or until you set it again. Laura, I want to thank you so much for sharing your story with us and taking the time to share your journey with us.
Laura, thank you so much for joining us. Folks, if you want to learn more about Jay and I and the show, you can visit us at visitwithspirit.com. You can contact both of us. You can contact each of us individually. And Laura, I know that you're a Reiki practitioner. If listeners want to get in touch with you, maybe for some Reiki healing, do you offer those services? Do you have anything that, anything that you want to share with our listeners?
I do offer those services, and I do, distant healing, as well as I'm kind of the traveling Reiki. I have my tables. I have table will travel. So, wherever you are, I can travel to you and offer Reiki, or I can do it distantly from where I am, and you can reach me through my email. And I do have a kind of a website in progress for my healing, but if they want to reach me, through my email, I have no problem. And it is lcfoley24@hotmail.com.
So thank you so much again for joining us today, Laura, and listeners. Souls and spirits, thank you so much again for joining us. And until next time, we hope that love and light surround you and your loved ones. Thank you for joining us today for our visit with Spirit. We hope you enjoyed listening. If you have any questions or comments, or would like to be a guest on our show, email us at visitwithspirit@gmail.com or find us on social media. Until next time, may love and light surround you, and come back again to Visit with Spirit.